Awesome. So Cliff Beach, how you doing, man?
I'm amazing. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you, man. I've been checking out your music, and it's very exciting. You're a fantastic, very talented artist, and very impressed, man.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, I'm still getting better every day.
Well, it's I don't know how much better you could get. Tell me, how did it start? What were your initial influences growing up as a kid? You know, the first music artist that you heard that you really had a connection.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting story. So I grew up in Washington, D.C., and my family, they're all pretty much Baptist ministers. Everyone except me and my mom are all like clergy. And so I grew up heavy on gospel music, Christian music, primarily. But every now and then we would sneak and I would see Soul Train, or I would watch on Oprah and Luther Vandross would be on, or I would see Michael Jackson when he used to stop The Simpsons at prime time and debut one of his music videos. So we would all gather around and watch that. So we had some exceptions, but I'm fortunate because I came from a family who had created their own kind of church in Pennsylvania, and they outlawed instruments. So they sang very, very intricate a cappella, like 5-6 part harmonies. So almost everyone in my family has a pretty good ear, pretty good knowledge of music, pretty good voice. I tell people that I'm not even the best singer in my extended 300 plus family. About 275 of them are all amazing. So humbling.
Singers.
Yeah, singers in that way. But yeah, musical influences growing up. I'm a kid of the 80s. And so obviously Michael Jackson, Prince, earlier elements later came in, you know, from George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic and stuff like that, Marvin Gaye, Motown stuff. But I think actually when I was 2 years old, my mom said I would drive around the car and I would always request her to put on Aretha Franklin, Pink Cadillac, Freeway of Love. And so yeah, a huge Aretha fan, and Ray Charles and Stevie. I think Stevie is probably one of my biggest influences coming into the 80s with him winning the Oscar for I Just Called to Say I Love You, but then really getting into like his 60s and 70s, really his 70s, I would say, Songs in the Key of Life, and that whole period is probably like some of the best. I've never seen someone who can do so many different genres so well and be so prolific as a writer and a producer, and just I think because he's blind, he sees the world in a different way, and you know, he does a lot of things that I think conventionally you would say like he probably sings incorrectly because he sings so high and so pushed.
Yeah.
But you know, he doesn't see it that way. So you know, you can break those limits when you don't see them.
When you don't know the limitations.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's so funny you say that about Stevie Wonder, because it's really funny you say that, because he does push. And growing up, anytime I heard Stevie Wonder, I always thought, man, he's got a really high voice. And then it occurred to me later, as I started studying music, no. His voice is not necessarily that high, but he's going the highest, which is pretty high. Mm-hmm. But it's not like he's necessarily, I mean, he can go really high, but his natural setting is probably lower. But you're right. He does push in some very crazy registers. Mm-hmm. And it's like, man, but it's like you said, he doesn't have the conventional limitations, right?
Yeah. I mean, also, he's just a human metronome. So many people know he plays and sings keyboard and harmonica. But Smokey Robinson said he was one of the best session drummers Motown ever had. And so when you look at something like Superstition or, the Too High and all that stuff, basically there was a time where he was, Higher Ground. When he wrote Higher Ground, he was in a coma. So what happens is that he was around 20, so he came out around 12 with his first record. So around 20, he's touring, and they're driving, and there's this kind of big truck that has all these logs kind of tied together, and one gets loose, and it flies through the windshield and knocks him out, and people thought that he was going to die.
Oh, man.
And so he's in a coma, and literally like 3-4 days in this coma, he pops out of the coma, and he's like, I got to go to the studio. And he lays down Higher Ground, all no drums.
Yeah.
The way you hear it on the record. In time.
On the beat.
Human metronome.
His own click.
Yep.
Man.
And so,
but yet I'm not surprised. As crazy as it sounds. You know, for Stevie Wonder.
Yeah. But you look at someone like a Michael Jackson, like in the last documentary of This Is It, it's like he proves how musical he is. So you're seeing like he's like, oh, like he didn't play any instruments, but then he's like, keyboard, what are you doing? He's like, oh, it's actually like they were like really into percussion and how they did stuff. And with him and Quincy Jones, the marriage after The Wiz and making Off the Wall, which was really slept on, and then Thriller and the other records, it was about, they pioneered this production technique basically where it was like a hook within a hook within a hook.
Yeah.
Vocal has a hook. Synth has a hook.
Horns
has a hook.
Yeah.
Drums has a hook.
Yeah.
But you look at like, I love how like because Ella Fitzgerald is one of my biggest jazz vocal influences. I love how she hung with all these horn people and then she learned how to scat that way. And so her voice was really a horn. James Brown had it in the 60s where he's like, you're a drum, everybody's a drum. The horns are a drum, everybody's a drum. So then when Michael came, it was like all these hooks. So when you listen to Don't Stop Till You Get Enough with Quincy, I was like, well, this melody is weird because it has all these tensions that aren't really in pop music. And then when you think about it, you're like, oh, Quincy's a trumpet player.
Yeah.
Quincy loved multiple trumpets in the section. And this is a trumpet song that's sung. So that's why the melody is dee 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 dee. That's a horn lick.
Yeah.
That's a horn lick.
Okay.
But only Michael was able to kind of keep up with that. So
you got a good point.
Yeah.
That is a trumpet melody typer. And it's got all these sub things going on at the same time with them.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But it's so much detail. And it's so fun. I agree with that. Off the Wall, in my opinion, Bad was amazing. Thriller was amazing. But to me, Off the Wall is off the chain. Like, am I crazy?
No, yeah, no,
That's
it is.
the number one album.
I mean, definitely, I think that brought out from Heat Wave, Raw Temperature. So I don't think people knew how good his writing was, when they brought him in to do Rock With You and a couple of the other songs Off the Wall included. And so that was one thing. Quincy was great at finding that type of talent. And then, but we wouldn't have had Thriller without Off the Wall and what happened with Off the Wall. So Off the Wall, like, so disco died at the end of the 70s, but Off the Wall kind of like was untouched because it was like the marriage of disco to R&B to pop, and it was great. But at the Grammys, Michael Jackson wins one Grammy during the commercial break for Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. And so what happened is he turns to Quincy and he's like, I think, that was a great album, Off the Wall, and it didn't get its recognition. So he's like, what we're going to do is we're going to go back in the studio. We're going to make an album that's so good, they will have no choice but to give us multiple Grammys.
Can't deny it.
And he was one of the first people to win, 5, 6 Grammys in a night. That was unheard of. It was hard enough to win one, let alone the same group winning 4 or 5. Yeah. Now, there's other people like Lauryn Hill and Adele and Beyonce that have won now 5 in a row at the same night. But it was rare.
That was
in the
rare
80s
back
for
then.
sure.
Yeah, no, you couldn't deny that. I mean, the work that they put into Thriller. Come on, right? You got Toto in there. You got the bass player from Brothers Johnson in there. I mean, he had the best of the best of the best of the best. And Michael himself was pretty particular. I mean, I know Quincy was running it, but it's like you said, even though he didn't play, he could scat the parts. He knew what he wanted. And I hear he'd dance during the sessions.
Yeah.
Right?
That's how they knew if it was a hit. They're like, if he starts moving, then we know that's the one. And then, it was cool because they had Greg Gaines, they had Bruce Swedien who did all the engineering for them. They had a dream team. But even then, it was like Michael was still paving the way. MTV still was racist in the beginning. They didn't want to play black artists. It was finally when one of the Sony execs was like, if you don't play Michael, we're not sending you anybody.
Yeah, we're pulling everything.
We're pulling it all. Yeah. And that really pushed that needle forward. But then Michael also, in terms of how they built, we're going to make these films. Not music videos. We're going to make films.
Full-on film.
With real directors. Like, I'm in American Werewolf in Paris, looking at it, and I want that guy. Yeah. And I want to be a werewolf, Yeah. And then we're gonna now take racist MTV and charge them to do the documentary, so we get the $1 million to make this film.
Really? Mm-hmm. They must have. I could see the connection because I remember MTV playing that documentary. Now, so they got their money's worth.
Yeah. But I mean, no one was thinking about wow, let's do this. I mean, the only pioneers of music video before that would have been, Elvis with Jailhouse Rock. That kind of was in the 50s, but it was Queen. Queen Bohemian Rhapsody kind of kicked it off because they had to make a music video because it was too difficult to sing it live. They had done so many layers and parts. I remember the story of the editors when they were carrying this tape. They had overdubbed so much, it was so thin that they were like afraid it would just break and collapse if they didn't get it over there. But that was another person, Freddie Mercury, who just had ideas and dreams and all of them, the whole group, how they went to conservatory and put it together. There was a demo of Freddie and Michael in the 80s trying to do something around the time of the game. That didn't come out. But
State of Shock.
Yeah.
And he ended up getting Mick Jagger because I guess Freddie couldn't make it or whatever or finish it.
Right.
Which sounded good with Mick, but I would have loved to have heard him or Freddie.
I love the story more of they wanted bad to be a duet with Prince.
Oh, that's right.
And Prince is with Chris Rock in the 90s, and he's like, yeah. So they're both Jehovah's Witness. And he's like, we're over there. And they had a whole bunch of beef for other reasons, but they liked each other and respect each other. But basically, the story is they put the demo on, and Prince is like, the first lyric is, Your butt is mine. He was like, "Are you singing that to me?" He was like, "Because I'm definitely not going to sing that to you." And that was the end.
That was the end of that
lyric
duet.
one.
That's hilarious.
And I mean, even still, when you look at that video, I'm like, how would Michael fight Wesley Snipes and win that fight? I don't think that
it doesn't quite add up, does it?
I don't think it's possible.
Not quite. Not Wesley. But so you know your music. That's so cool. You definitely, I could see that you, not just on the musical side, but you know the history, and it looks like that's played so much into your music. Would you say, just collectively? Yeah,
I mean, I've taught music and to people for the last 20 years too, and I always tell students or whoever, I think if you're a really lover of it, you need to go back as far as possible, and we have now this. The internet, which is a wayback machine. Now you don't have to go into a musty library with laser discs and stuff. Like, I had to dig and find vinyl and find cassette tapes and twist them back together when they came apart and all that stuff. So now you can, just look up YouTube and find a song and listen to it and stuff. And so that's amazing. But yeah, I think we should try to go back. Because it's like when you look at a Michael Jackson, you can't study Michael Jackson without studying James Brown. You can't study James Brown without studying Little Richard and the people before him. So they're like always learning from Louis Armstrong in the 20s to now. Someone is always learning from what came before.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a huge Prince fan. And in college, I started thinking, okay, Prince is amazing, but who was his influence? And then, you had to go back to Sly Stone, and you had to go back to James Brown and all these other artists. And it's just like, you realize, and it doesn't take anything away from Prince, but you see the history of where he came from with the influences, and they're amazing as well. And it's just so much you can pick up from that. So I became a big Sly fan because I was like, man, he's awesome too.
Yeah.
And I had no idea it was a little bit further back, but no, you're right. It's really good to know a big vocabulary of music, not just what's out right now, because there's just so much rich history. And plus, I don't know about you, but for me, 60s, 70s, 80s, I mean, there's still amazing music out today, but that time frame is just like, it's kind of hard. That's some good stuff.
I definitely agree. I think that is the timeless kind of era. I think also it was how we approached the musicianship. It had a lot to do with it, but there's a lot of artists that, didn't necessarily look the best, but they were really talented, and it'd be hard to have them start now, in the world of Instagram and TikTok. It's a different world. Also, just the way the industry was back then. So you look at someone like an Aretha Franklin, it was like, if we had the industry we had now, you'd never hear of her because she was allowed to have essentially 7-8 albums that went nowhere before eventually having that big
huge
hit. And people knew that she had the talent, but even with the Prince, it's like his first album, For You, people didn't really listen to that.
It wasn't known. Wasn't known, really.
And so we need to still have that that incubation. We need people to be able to, because every idea is a good idea until another idea comes along and trumps that. You do what you know, and when you can do better, you do better. But they need to allow artists to be able to have those periods of incubation to try things. You know, they're going to write a bunch of stuff. You look at Pharrell. Pharrell, when he was writing Happy, he sent them 14 songs before that became
Did he really?
the hit that it became. They rejected everything else. In the same way, Shaka Khan, when Stevie Wonder was writing Tell Me Something Good, he sent them a bunch of demos they didn't like. Tell Me Something Good is about that experience. Tell me something good. Tell me that you like it. I'm tired of writing demos for you, Shaka.
So
that's
finally.
what Stevie said. Yeah. So it's like it happens, but that's the process. That's why Prince has some amazing albums. Yeah. And then he has some vault albums that were just, you know, for him. They weren't for everybody.
Yeah. He did it for him. You know, that's definitely what it came across sometimes. But either way, it was genius. So tell me, so you started in the church, and then when did you start kind of performing as an artist?
Well, I went to pretty much secondary school until 16. Once I graduated high school early, I went off to conservatory at Berklee College of Music in Boston. So I got my undergraduate, I think I graduated at 19. And so I knew nothing. And then they were just like, have you ever seen the movie Whiplash? It wasn't quite like that. It wasn't like, what's my tempo, you know, and J.K. Simmons throwing stuff at us.
Throwing stuff at you while you're trying to play?
Yeah, well, I wasn't the Rocky Balboa putting my hands in ice. But it felt like that. I mean, it was like you start with all these people who are been doing it way longer than you, way better, had more opportunities, and you just, like Drake said, you start from the bottom. And so I started at the 101 level of every class, and I just lived in that media center library, and I was like, I'm just going to learn. I think many people say a lot of things, but basically there's this thing where it's like, I don't have to be the best, but I know you can't out-hustle me. Like, I will learn and grow and stretch and put myself out there and fail forward and fail fast and learn more faster than, you know, the people who, because a lot of people, they can peak early. There were people like my best friend who went to school with me. When I came out, you know, I was still learning. He was winning like gold medals for symphonies he was writing. But then we went to school, he stopped, and he didn't really write after that, you know. So like at 18, 19, that was his peak. Whereas I was still learning at 30, then on my precipice of saying, let me make 10 albums in 10 years, and now over 40, we've done that. But it took me a little bit longer to get there. But that whole time I was in that learning mode of still hustling to know as much as I can. So that's why now I'm like, okay, this year I want to do a foray into jazz. I could do that because I spent 20 years listening to that music, knowing that eventually I wanted to put my mark into a different genre than I normally do. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I was only kind of pigeonholed or focusing on funk or soul. I grew up on a lot of musical genres and like a lot of things, and sometimes I like rock, and you'll hear those elements. And rock was at one point a black music that people forget. And so
absolutely,
blues, country, like you see Beyonce doing Cowboy Carter. People are like, well, yeah, there's black people who did country music. The Pointer Sisters won a Grammy for 1978 for Fairy Tale. So Charlie Pride and other people. It's not new, but it's like you have to remind people, you know, that it's like, oh, we do a little bit of everything. Don't think we just do one thing.
I've always said that as rock and roll is most definitely. It started with the black community, most definitely.
Sure,
and still very is, and I mean, it's like one of my favorite bands of all time, Living Colour. I just, when they came out, I was just floored, and just particularly the singer and the guitar player, and I always felt that they never got their due.
Sure.
And then you always used to kind of say the same thing. They're just like, well, wait a minute. Like, this is not new to this is our culture. I was like, absolutely. And I always feel like if they would have come out today, I think, I don't know, it might have, I mean, they had success, but I think maybe they would have even had even bigger success.
Definitely. It's always hard. I mean, you look at that documentary, a band called death metal band, at the same time as Motown. Nobody really heard of it. I came from D.C., Bad Brains. Like, some people know, some people don't. You look at, even like a Lenny Kravitz. It's like there's a few people, Gary Clark Jr., but then there's others that kind of fall by the wayside. Like Fishbone. I used to practice near them and see all Norwood and those people and Trulio Disgracias and all that. It was like they came at the same time as a No Doubt and a Sublime and a Save Ferris, and some popped and some didn't. So there's always something underneath the surface that makes it one way or another. But I think ultimately, as an artist, you want to be able to touch people in the medium that you can reach them, but at the same time you're constantly evolving, and so you don't want to necessarily be like, well, I can only do one thing. And we've had some artists with great success. You look at a Taylor Swift or a Pink, they've made evolution, or Bruno Mars. It's like by the time he got to Silk Sonic, totally different from the beginning
totally
stuff.
Different.
Anderson .Paak has evolved, so it's like I say that's the track I want to be on. I could be a slow boil as long as it just keeps rumbling underneath the surface, but I'm going to do something different every time, because otherwise I'll get bored.
You got to keep it interesting. Mm-hmm. So you're not one of those artists that's constantly got to repeat with the same formula. You like to mix it up.
You have to. It's like even Michael Jackson, like you can't make Thriller 2.
No.
It doesn't work.
No.
Even if you try to get lightning in a bottle, you try to get all the same people and the same thing. It's just never the same thing twice.
No, I totally see it. It wouldn't work. Mm-mm. So just go on to something else, because it's like you said, how could you replicate that sound, that vibe, that time? You can't.
Yeah, and you change too. It's like you've been on tour for a couple of years and you're exhausted and you've seen some things. Like, it's gonna be a different experience. You're just not that person. That's what I love about Prince. It's like, he retired some songs. Like, I'm not going to do these anymore. Or if he's like, did them, he totally flipped them. Yeah. And so it's like, you have to do that, because otherwise you become a caricature of what you used to be.
Yeah, or the past.
Yeah, and it's never as good.
Yeah. No, I so much appreciated that about Prince. I mean, he would take chances, and sometimes it wouldn't really always work out in his favor, but I love the fact that it just didn't stop him. Yeah. There was just not a whole lot of, well, I hope that, it's like, no, this is me. This is where I'm at now. And that's why I think always with his videos, his concert, he wasn't crazy about people posting, maybe a video from his Revolution tour, Purple Rain or whatever. But it was because it's like, that was what I was doing in 83, 84. This is me now. I want you to come out to the new show. I want you to get the new album. And I appreciated his guts,
Yeah.
Because he could have said no. I mean, when he got his record deal at, 18, 19, he's like, okay, so I'm going to do this whole album by myself. And I'm just going to put me in the studio. I'm going to do my thing. And they thought he was crazy. And then they heard the tapes and they're like, I think we just let him do his thing. And I think that I always appreciate artists like that, because I know, my own personal experience. It's like when you have an opportunity, it's kind of hard to still hold your own as an artist when you're getting pushed and pulled with the opportunity. I mean, have you ever had that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, definitely you have to know kind of what you stand for and what you will and won't do. I think it's tough too as an artist, because there's the art and then the marriage of the commerce, and some people do that really well. I'm so sorry. That's okay. Some people do that really well and some people don't. So it's like with Prince, when he's writing Slave on his face and fighting against Warner Brothers, they have a way of making the artist look like the crazy person. But then when they really explain behind the scenes, he's like, why shouldn't I get like a full retainer, or why am I recouping this? Like, I made it, I produced it, and I played everything. So like, where is this money going? Or why is it taking me so long to recoup? Or why can't I just get that money for me, since I did everything, just pay it out.
Own the rights.
Yeah, own the rights. Like, why can't we own it 50-50? Like, we're owning it not even 80-20 or whatever. So it's like, you hear that. In the same way, I feel that's what happened with Dave Chappelle. So Dave Chappelle, when he left Comedy Central, he goes to Africa. Everyone's like, oh, he went crazy, whatever. I was like, nobody leaves for millions of dollars for no reason. Not that they can come out outright and tell you, but I was like, but I can most certainly see from how that show was going. He's doing a lot of racial stuff, and it's funny, right? And it's funny when you're the person dictating what you want to do. But now when you've become the highest DVD sales of all time for Comedy Central, and they're owned by Viacom or whatever, and then you have all these suits who don't look like you. Now they're like, I need you to tell more N-word jokes or whatever. It leaves a taste that you're like, I don't want to do this. I now it's crossed the line where we're not doing it to be funny. We're doing it because now you guys are running the show that I created, and I don't feel comfortable. So then eventually, years later, he gets to go to Netflix and does his own thing and makes the amount of money he would have made then. But it's like, it sounds crazy because no one knows what happened.
Yeah.
But if he explains it, I'm sure it makes sense. Because you
completely.
just don't about face and be like, forget this money.
Forget all that money.
It's like something has happened where you're like, I just can't.
Yeah.
It's like, there's a principle, and if you have them, then you won't, money is to a point, but you can't be bought. Like, you be like, I just won't, I'll just become obscure, Then, because once you can't look at yourself in the mirror, then you just can't face yourself and do it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
No, there's definitely a point where, an artist can lose it. So how do you stay true to your artistry and making sure that you're true to your musical vision, and that, you may have this opportunity, that opportunity, but you can keep your own path and be true to yourself?
For me, I think it's pretty easy because for good or bad, I feel like when I open my mouth, I sound like me and I'm me, and I've never tried to be really, for at least a good amount of time, anybody else. And so I think the more me I become, the more people gravitate to me. But now I'm to the point where, like, I don't even know if I wanted to be anything else, if I could do anything else. I'm so me. So that makes it a little bit easy. But at the same time, you just have to know what you will do. So original music is always a harder path than doing cover music, But it's like, for me, there's nothing interesting to do covers all the time. Like, I'll cover them in interesting ways, but just to do the carbon copy, what they call sound-alike projects, or cover bands, like, I don't do them because I need the freedom. I need the autonomy to sound like me, and also it's just, it's not energizing. It's not exciting. And so I work and do other things and make money in different areas so that I can be selective about projects that I do, and that I don't have to take everything, and I don't. And I say no to things because I'm like, oh, that's not me. Like, people ask me all the time. They're like, can you do this cover gig? Can you do this wedding? Can you do whatever? I'm like, well, that's not really me.
Yeah.
But then I ended up doing 2 seasons of Josh Gates Tonight on Discovery Channel, which is now on Max. And the cool thing about that is, like, they're like, we want you to be the house band, and we have to have original music, like, for licensing reasons. So it was like, yes.
Perfect fit.
So they were like, we're looking for a funk band. You're the only one around that we could find that does originals.
Yeah.
So
they're all a bunch of cover bands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's cool. But then I've had other times where, like, they're like, hey, Julia Dreyfus wants this rap party for Veep. Can you come play that funky music whiteboard? And I was like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that. They're like, but you could. I was like, I could. But I won't.
You're not going to do it.
And then people are like, how do you turn that down? I was like, because I don't like who I become if I have to do that. When you squeeze me into that box, it's never quite right. They've already done it, and they're going to do it better than me. And I could do it, but I don't get energy from that. It's just like, if you're an introverted person, people are like, you should go out and be with a lot of people, but you don't draw energy from that. So that becomes like the opposite effect of what you want to do. Like,
Right.
you draw energy being primarily by yourself. So you have to set yourself up for success by, like, just like we dress for our body type, you have to, like, put yourself in positions based on your shape
Right.
of your personality and what you choose you want to do. And it's a choice. That's the thing. It's like, there's not enough money to be like, I'm going to just forsake myself and my ideals and what I want to do for this one time thing. And I'm not saying there's never an exception, but then, you have to charge an obscene amount of money.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. It's, I I've seen so many artists kind of get lost in the mix pursuing the dream. And it's I appreciate artists like you that can stay with it and be true to your musical path, because it can be tempting. You know, certain things come up and, you know, maybe this label wants you to do that, or this opportunity, you know, and it's just like, I think, you know, would you say that the audience can tell if you're really being true? Like they pick it up more. They cling on to you.
I think if you have the right audience who is above the fray, then yes, I think they're a more discerning crowd. You know, so like I just went to see Jasmine Horn in Denver at this place called Dazzle, and she had a crowd that was like smart. They really could get it, and they got where she was coming from with really deep stories, and she was able to take her time. And then I've seen other groups where, and no shade on the audience, but I've seen other groups recently where like they come out and people just start clapping. I'm like, I'm going to reserve my clap for when they play and what they've done. Because sometimes, like, people, they don't know. Like, I was telling a friend, I was like, when people come out and they're like, they played a solo, I was like, this really wasn't any notes or melody. It's just loud. Or they just play the same note over and over and people are just clapping. I was like, but that in and of itself is not really a thing.
Yeah.
But sometimes people just don't know. Or sometimes it's like, they're just happy to be out. Like, they just... whatever, you know, but I feel like that's a really low bar. I think the difficulty now out of all that, besides having a discerning crowd, I think the difficulty with crowds now is what I've seen is that either people live deep into their phone. So like they don't even know they're at a concert unless they're seeing it through the screen.
Filming it.
Yeah, and it's like, everyone. It's like sometimes you don't even have your phone, but you're looking at someone else's phone from where you are. So it's like everyone's just so used to seeing stuff in this little window. And then also music and things, they become intrusive to them. Like people are like, I have this bubble. I'm with my friends doing my thing, and like I want it. Like they want it to be live, but on demand. Like they want it to be like what they want when they want.
Part of their bubble. They're not really there for the experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like we used to have this. Like I've seen it where like you go into a bar. And they're like, oh, there's a band. Like 30 years ago, people were like, oh, there's a band. That's amazing. Now people are like, I'd rather have a DJ or a Spotify or nothing, you know.
Or it's going to be too loud on my cell phone to record it. This is going to, you know.
Yeah, so it's like that's a little bit. But I mean, again, you know, different things draw different crowds. So there's some crowds that really get it and understand. I think where we're moving towards, and I haven't figured this out for myself yet, but I think what's going to happen, like in terms of selling stuff, like you'll have CDs, you have vinyl, but not everybody has that. I was telling someone, I was like, my friend owns this winery, and I don't drink, but I was like, essentially, like if you were like, okay, well, every year we're going to make a new wine, right? And the label and the QR code and everything is the music, right?
Yeah. It's
like, and you can't stream it. You got to buy the wine.
You got to buy it.
And you sell it for $100.
Yeah.
The wine costs you $2. People will buy that before they buy a record or a CD because they'll be like, oh, that's cool. Yeah. That's wine. It's something different.
Tangible.
You know, it doesn't even matter if the wine was great or the music was great, but somehow you're able to sell it for more because you've taken intangible and made it tangible.
Correct.
But you've made it tangible that I can still interact with my phone and the medium because I'm not going to play a record and I don't want to take up space in my place and that kind of thing. So I think that's where people are going to move towards. They're going to figure out like, how do we make a shoe with a record, you know? So like that, because the art and commerce combination is how do we take the intangible back to tangible?
Make it back to
because
tangible.
I want you to spend $10 on a CD, which people are like, I don't have a CD player.
Yeah.
But I'll buy a wine for $100 with the music because
won't even last as long.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's just the perception.
That's perception.
Perception is reality. And I think once they figure that out, once they figure out the at-home viewing experience that has some type of 3D component, like I can throw Spotify Cube in the middle of the floor and all of a sudden now I got the Rolling Stones in my living room or whatever. That's something I want to see some part of my life. And then also I want to be able to have the vinyl experience digitally. Whether that mean when I'm in Spotify, I can somehow get to like a flip book of a jacket, but I want to know the songwriters and the producers and some cool stuff about the band that I didn't know. And we just haven't figured that out.
Yeah.
But when we do.
I'm with you. I mean, the full experience is taken away when you can stream anything. But it's like you said, if there's a way that you could, just like back in the day, have the artwork and... Because you really felt like you got to learn the artist when you got to open up that album or CD. And like I said, see the credits, just get a vibe of like where they're from or where they recorded or something. You know?
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like there are still a few labels, like the label that I'm on now, Color Red Music. They put out all great content. They just, they have that old school. And there's like the Dead Oceans and Coal Mine and Daptone in Brooklyn, and those they really picked up that Motown torch. Like what I do miss about the Motown era is that, which we never had again, is that you would have a label where every album they didn't phone it in. They were all good. But also, they would do tours of their entire lineup. So you'd have Stevie and Smokey and Marvin and Diana. Yeah. And man, you couldn't pay to have a bill like that now.
You couldn't get that now.
They don't do it. But it's like, and the record companies, they're out of that business. So that's like, the agencies that do all that. So they're like totally separate.
Yeah.
No one vertically integrated any of that now. And so that's why you don't see those types of like label shows. But I wish they did. I think Daptone used to do a couple of reviews in Brooklyn when Sharon Jones was alive and Charles Bradley and a couple of them. But nothing to the level of that Motown, like you see the bus and you're
full
like,
package. Boom,
And I think, B.B. King had a review like that. James Brown had a review like that when people really toured. But now it's a different
it's a whole different
world.
Animal.
I love when Prince was doing the Forum and you would get the album with the ticket, So
Wasn't that genius?
Yeah.
That was so genius.
So
and he was on number one for that.
Yeah. Well, people want to see the live. They're already there.
I mean, I don't see why that should be like a thing, like a regular thing, right?
Should. And if you got a 2-drink minimum, get the CD, get a couple drinks, get a wristband, get a couple more drinks. They just got to make it... Because people are going to spend anyway.
Oh, they will.
So give them the parking, give them the album, give them the drinks.
Especially while they're out. Yeah.
Exactly.
And then they have something to carry on the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And be like, yeah, I remember that show. Oh, this is a great album too.
Oh, yeah. But there's definitely some experiences. I think the main thing as an artist for me is I really try to make sure that I see the artists that I want to see before they pass. I just saw Herbie Hancock for the 50th anniversary of the Headhunters at Hollywood Bowl a couple months ago.
What?
And it was the first time in 50 years they've had pretty much the entire lineup. One of the pre-rolls passed away, so they replaced Paul Jackson Jr. with Marcus Miller, who is no slouch for sure.
Yeah.
But it was just great because I've seen Herbie a couple times, but I haven't heard him play back to front Headhunters, and that was just such a legendary crossover funk fusion thing. And years before Rocket, also with Herbie, Rocket was what I think the third black artist MTV played after Little Red Corvette and Billie Jean. So I think, and then Herbie, I think he's one of the only best album of the year jazz albums ever.
Yeah.
If any. So I still think he's remarkable at 80 and just his countenance, because he switched years ago being Buddhist into like not the doing of performing, but the being of music. He is music.
He is music.
And I think, 50 years of Headhunters, he probably had 10 years of solo before that and was with Miles before that. So he's got a lot of years behind him in the space, but he still seems like he's carrying that torch for Wayne Shorter, who I hadn't seen, who recently passed. Sergio Mendes just passed recently.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like those, I just try to make my list every year of like, I gotta see my greats, put the flowers while they're still alive.
I feel the same way. I just went to the Full in Love Festival a couple weeks ago with my daughter and got to see so many fantastic, insane artists. And it's good because, we just don't know how much longer we're going to have them. And so to be able to get in that experience and, there's so many artists, there was like maybe 15 minutes to 30 minutes per artist. But even just that little snippet, it's just like, man, like finally getting to see George Clinton.
Oh, nice.
Seeing Atomic Dog live, and I'm just like, this is even better than what I thought.
Right?
It's even better, man. Like,
he puts on a good show.
Yeah.
That's a great song, too. One of a kind. Never heard another song like it, ever.
No. I heard, like, when they put it together, it's like the beat, they ran it backwards, and then they kind of went from there. Something, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, the keyboardist Bernie Worrell, he had worked on it, and they played it backwards, and so that's why it kind of doesn't tonicize. Like, it's kind of like not in a key. But those mistakes are happy accidents. The Shaka Khan, when she redid the Prince, that was a mistake where it just kept saying Shaka Khan, Shaka Khan. That's just somebody leaning on the playback,
And then they're like,
it's good. Because she said in an interview, she was like, I was mortified. She's like, I didn't want to hear my name over and over like that. It's weird.
Yeah.
I was like, well, it was weird to the bank, because they all won Grammys on that. So.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I love. I had some friends that were playing with Eric Burdon and the Animals at that concert you were at.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
So, classic. Yeah, they had 15, 30 minutes, 2 stages, just boom, boom, boom. That's great, though.
Yeah.
That's probably almost as close as you're going to get to that Motown review, where you had a lot of people.
I mean, the only people that weren't there were maybe Ohio players, which I don't even know if they still out. Maybe. But they had everything, man. They had Daz Band. They had Shaka was there.
Nice.
I mean, all of it was just incredible. But my favorite was Charlie Wilson, the Gap Band.
Oh, yeah.
He's just, I don't know what it is. He's just such a great vocalist, showman, songwriter. But even I don't know how old he is. He's probably pushing his late 70s, but he's still got it.
Mm-hmm.
He's still got it, just like it was 1982, whatever, when they, the first early days of their success. But there's just something about his performance. I think he stole the show.
Yeah, I can see that.
He stole it.
It's because he and maybe 10 years before Ron Isley, they really fought to stay relevant and to keep making music and still sounding good. So he's had a long solo career, which kept him relevant and kept him working, and his voice stayed up there. I'm super excited because the Luther Vandross documentary is finally going to come out after festival season in November. So I think Oprah, OWN, and CNN bought it.
Oh, nice.
The rights to put it out, so it's coming into theaters. But I think it's time for the world to revere how good a vocalist and songwriter, but really as a vocalist, when you talk about someone with longevity, like his voice up till death just was a fine wine. It got better and better and better. He never aged. And to a lesser extent, until he got really old, Tony Bennett, I mean, I had a lot of respect for him. I saw him with Stevie 5 years ago. And at 90, I was like, I want to be 90 on my own accord. Just walk out on stage like, I'm here.
Yeah.
I sang my song and delivered it. And I mean, up until the last year, 95, making a record with Gaga, who was, I don't know, 35.
Yeah,
and
something
so
like that.
I think he had the longest span of doing the same song on the record like 60 years apart. Man. But
that's incredible.
And they've had so many resurgences, because they kind of they're revered, but at the same time, they were kind of like a little bit late, like Frank Sinatra was an era and Tony Bennett wasn't a contemporary. He was after that.
He's kind of at the end of that.
Yeah, so he's kind of into that era. And then now you got like Bublé who picked up the torch.
Just carrying it on.
Nobody was doing it.
That's true.
So it seems fresh now because a lot of people have no
recollection. How much this goes back.
Yeah.
What do you think it is to some of these artists then, like you saw, like to be able to maintain that longevity with not only just being relevant, but being able to perform for so long? Because you see some other artists that, maybe their voice hasn't held up quite as well.
Yeah, I think gender has a lot to do with it too, but how you lived as a person, so you look at a Herbie Hancock, he doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke. So I think that does help to a certain extent. But it's your mind too. I think in mindset, I think, if you're of a mindset that you can constantly improve and that age is just a number, then I think you can just keep going. And I think people who are really living their best life, they find out when we study longevity in the blue zones and stuff like that. People who like, how do I put this? You stay useful and it keeps you youthful, right? So they're linked. So it's like if you keep doing this, I've seen it. I've seen old musicians, you wheel them out there and they look like they died last week, but they had no sick time left. They're still there. And then when they put them in front of their instrument, they just light up, like it was like this person who looked like they were just about to pass out, like has come alive, When I see Herbie with his guitar running on stage like a 20-year-old at 80, I'm like, that's what keeps you young.
He's still doing it up.
And I'm keeping it moving. I have an aunt or older cousin who's over 80, and we said, what's your secret? She said, you just got to keep moving. Like the body is meant to move. Yeah. And that's why all these people now, we sit at desks and we're always sedentary. We gained a lot of weight. It's all a part of that. So I just say, get out there, perform, stand,
keep it moving.
Move, sing like you mean it, put your all into it, because you're going to get exponentially back out more than you put out there. But I think sometimes for many reasons we either play it safe or we play it small, and they don't make statues for people like that. Like you got to go big. You got to go big to be remembered.
Big statues.
Yeah.
So, I mean, getting back to you, I mean, you grew up singing in the church and then Berkeley. I mean, how did you discover your voice? I mean, as far as your singing voice, was it something that you always kind of sang a certain way, or that took time to develop? I mean, how did you carve that out?
No, it did. It's like, so into the 90s, early 2000s at Berkeley, I feel like I was more of kind of the softer side of singing, and I did a lot more ballads. I think because it was just easier to navigate a slow song. I had time to think and process and everything. But then I had a friend that was really heavily into blues music, and I remember when I first started listening to blues music, I was like, it's just the same whining and the same 12 bar, and I don't get it. And she was like, no, they're different, they're nuanced. And so she's my best friend and a year older. So that's in teen years, a year older is a lifetime older. So she's the sage, and I don't know anything. So she was like, you kind of like funk music. You should really focus on that because it'll make you different. Because we were trying to figure out, like at a place like Berkeley where everybody was so good at so many things, it was like you gotta carve a niche, because I realized I was learning to gain a voice because I would go and audition against people, and people, we're always sizing each other up in music school, like, oh, this person, they're gonna hit that high A and that kind of thing. And so I would hear people on the side, they were like, oh, well, he's gonna audition, but Cliff's gonna do like his own thing. It became like he does it something different. He's different. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew I wasn't like the rest, or comparatively, they weren't like, you sound like this person's gonna use just you. So I just tried to steer into what that is. And so I just was like, I really do like funk music, soul music. I like grit. I saw a band recently and I was like, man, it's like I could give you flour and water and eggs. But that doesn't make a cake. Like they have all the elements. But I was like, but they didn't have grit.
Didn't pop.
I was like, why did they make it so watered down? And everyone loved it, but for me, I was just like, I like my funk with a little skunk, with a little back end. It's not even about playing the right notes as much as like the feeling, And so, and you see it. But the beauty of it is that funk allows you to have this kind of like backbone, So you take a band like Chic, and then it's like, oh, now we're gonna do this Madonna record, It's like, man, they bring a whole energy to that. Or it's like you can have the James Brown kind of funk, and then Parliament was like, he's the clean version, we want the dirty version, and then they switched to that, and then from there you have people who are like, and now we're gonna do that next kind of variation, like Earth, Wind, and Fire. That they were like, we're gonna do it, but everything's super crafted and manicured, but still had the grit. So it's like, But then you have like a Tower of Power, and then you have Chicago. Like, so everyone has their own like little flavors. Cool in the Gang, you know.
Yeah.
I saw them. They're all a little bit different. But I think growing up in DC, years later, I had such an appreciation for go-go music, which is like nobody knows, but Chuck Brown and the Soul Searchers, and I mean, you should know when you have a song called Ashley's Roach Clip, you know what they're talking about. But it's cool because it was like, wow, he really understood jazz, and he worked with Eva Cassidy. So it's like people, they do all kinds of stuff, and he was known in all kinds of circles. And so anyway, go-go is a derivative of funk, and with EU and Spike Lee, that was really the only top kind of 20 with Doing the Butt. But I like how I like being from somewhere else, like from Maryland, from the DMV, because you know, we're close enough to Philly, we're close enough to New York, we're close enough to Boston, so we get a lot of different elements. But we're still also close enough to the South, and we get elements of that. We get even some of that Appalachian bluegrass mountain music. You know, Maryland, Damascus has some country parts. You know, so it's like you get a little bit of everything, kind of like you have that mix in the Delta. We've got like a mid-Atlantic mix. And so I think, you know, when you're from somewhere else and everyone in LA is a transplant, then it's like it gives me a different knowledge. And I think, you know, being from that church background, I mean, DC has so many churches, so I learned so much about organists and how people play and the runs that they do and stuff that then I could put into other stuff. So all that call and response and stuff that you get. So all the great funk players, whether you're looking at an Aretha or a James Brown, like they all came from church to some extent, you know. That's why Aretha's biggest album is the gospel one, you know, the 2 million selling Amazing Grace. And that documentary finally came out after 30 years being on the shelf. It's cool because it's like, yeah. So when I meet people, I play stuff on the radio station for my radio show, and I'm like, we're going to do a whole Al Green gospel set. I was like, you can't like Al Green and not know gospel.
Absolutely.
Like, it's like this man is dripping
so much of it in it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Totally. And like you said, Aretha Franklin, I mean, totally came up in the church. Mm-hmm. And man, that's so rich. And you're right. That DC area. I'm actually from Virginia Beach, and so I went to school at George Mason, and wanted to go to Berkeley, but ended up at George Mason. But yeah, it is definitely that Mid-Atlantic that you have just a little bit of everything in there, and it's so interesting, and it's got so much of that, like you said, that backbone to it. It's a great musical area.
Sure.
And I probably you the same. It's like I talk to people, and they're like, oh, I didn't know they're from Virginia. I didn't know they're from I was like, no, there's a lot of talent from there.
Mm-hmm. Well, you got Timbaland, you got Missy, you got
D'Angelo.
Pharrell, you got D'Angelo.
I mean, you know, yeah. I mean, it's so much, so rich there. So tell me about your creative process as far as, you know, what mode do you get into when you want to create a song? I mean, do you kind of start off with a riff or a beat, or what do you do?
Yeah, people ask me that all the time. It's always a little bit different, but typically I will have, like, I'll work off a riff, or I'll work off like a lyric idea or a concept, or a mixture of those. The main thing for me is that years ago I used to carry around like a notepad, but I carry around my phone, and so I'm always putting notes on my phone or recording on my phone because I forgot so many ideas, like in like a 5-minute window of like, that was gonna be the hot one, and they're like, oh, I forgot it. And so yeah, just document everything quickly because you will forget. But yeah, I tried to have like, I would say like a verse chorus like worked out of a song that I can kind of that should work, or I'll come back and flush it out. So yeah, it's a little bit different. Sometimes I'm like, I want to co-write or work with people. Most of the stuff I write by myself, but every now and then I'm like, okay, I want to pull in this group because they have that kind of sound, and maybe they'll work on it with me, as I did with Confident and a few other things with Mestizo B out of Topanga. So I think it just depends. But sometimes I'll hear other group songs, and I'll be like, hey, that song is cool. but I wish it did this, you know, and then it takes me down that rabbit hole of like,
the same
what
way.
would that be, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. I hear a song and I like what they did with the guitar, but if they would have done the drums a little different. So that might be a good point of like creating something, right?
Exactly.
Oh man. No, that's interesting.
And I love that there's artists now that are like letting you into their process. So I bought a record by Esperanza Spalding during the pandemic. She did a whole Facebook Live and she showed us how she made the record. Like they wrote the record and recorded it live where we could see everything. And then she gave us like little pieces of the note board with the vinyl or whatever. It was cool. And then, but now you have people like Nate Smith, amazing drummer, and he did Pocket Change and Pocket Change 2. And so he does all these drum loops, and then it's made in a way where you're able to, they have ways that you can pull down the session files, and then you can use those loops to, you know, create your own thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's cool that people are like open sourcing their ideas, because it's like, a drummer and the beats are cool, but then they're just, you know, they're just beats. They don't have like a bass line or anything. So it's like, it's cool to see that people interpolate those ideas into their own, you know, ideas. Because everyone borrows, you know, they
borrow something.
You have to. It's like, it's not like everyone can just record in a vacuum. They never heard anything and they didn't, you know, that's why they say great artists steal. Because they steal in a way where like, it's absorbed where it's so homogenous you can't even like pick out the parts they took, you know?
Huh.
And there's like a line of, you know, obviously people getting sued with infringement if you've taken too much, but we all take from something.
We all take a piece of something.
Definitely.
Do you like have your own studio? You have a home studio or?
I'm set up to record at home, but I usually toggle between, I have a friend's studio in Westlake Village, and then like I'll record at different studios. Like I've recorded at Moose Cat, which is in Mid-City. I have a friend at 5A who has a studio in downtown LA. So I kind of toggle between different places. Like if I'm recording vocals, who has the best vocal chain and stuff. Because I'm not an engineer, but also I don't have the patience. And also I don't have the time, but also like I don't have the patience.
Same way.
It's like my editor, like so many times you'll see behind the scenes photos where he'll take it, like I just fall asleep, like laying on the ground. Because like I'll see the process so long that I'm just like, just tap me when I need to hear something. But he loves it. Like some people nerd out on like little, I'll tweak this. And it's like, well, you know, if it was this many decibels or this much distortion, this kind of thing, I'm like, you know, I'm a gist person. Like, oh, it's kind of whatever. But I love the energy of being with people. And I learned from, because I've recorded with the people from Oregon. They have a studio in the Valley. I've recorded with Mestizo. They have a studio with them in Topanga. The Color Red out in Denver, they have a studio. Every studio has its own energy, you know? It's like, even if it's like a little room, like all the high records, Al Green stuff was done in a real little box. The early Motown stuff, little box.
Yeah.
Old Beatles stuff and Abbey Road, that was little. And so, but, you know, when the Aretha's like, oh, we're going to go to Muscle Shoals and record this record at Fame, it was just, but they have a hallowed halls, but it was like the energy. It's a vortex. Like so every time I record in a certain place, I'll be like, I want to go to that studio because it's got a vibe.
Got a spirit to it.
Yeah, and it's like before we've even played anything, it's like it's just you go in there, and everybody who goes in there, when we start to get on that same vibration, it's different, and the people you pick is important. You know, the choice, because it's not just because you might have egos or other stuff or playing skills. Sometimes I played with people and the skills compared to someone else was less, but I still wanted them because I knew that they were going to bring an energy.
Yeah.
You know, that the other person who may have a higher technical proficiency, well, they might bring a different energy. And that energy has to gel with everybody. So it's like, you can't just have like one person whose energy is totally different and everyone else is different, because it's going to like,
it'll mess it up.
And so I can tell, like when we play something, I'll send something to someone like, hey, what do you think about this? You know, and they're like, oh, like I get I get it. You know, it's like I always like working with people with like we don't really need a lot of words, you know? Like I worked with a drummer when I was recording my gospel record in DC, in Baltimore, and the bass player, it was just the three of us in this church on Towson, and it was like midnight. We're going to cover the Headhunters, God Made Me Funky. We just ate this crazy amount of gas station fried chicken, and they're like, I think I got like one take left in me. And we did it, but it was cool because this drummer, I had never met him, and I'm like, hey, I think it's kind of like this and that, singing a little bit, playing keyboard, and he's like, I got you, and that's it. That was all we said.
That's all it took.
6 minutes later to one take.
It was done.
That was it.
Oh man!
And it almost didn't happen, and it did. And it was like because we kept it so loose and so spontaneous and so improv. And everyone brought the skill. But beyond that, it was just like we had an energy. Because like we had to be vibrating where I could just look at him and we could trust each other. And we didn't know each other and we didn't have time to say much. But we could tell nothing else needed to be said. The the smile, that was it. I was like, he has it. And he did.
Yeah.
And I never doubted that he had it because I felt it. I felt it beyond the words. I was like, yep, that shored that up. He's got it.
It's a musical language. Mm-hmm. Now that's always cool when you play with someone that you've never played with before, and it's just like, and it just happens.
And it happens in the reverse. Yeah. I've had people where I was like, thank you for coming. You know, like nothing against their playing. You know, it just was like something was off, and it's not necessarily you. It could be me. Yeah. But it's like something is off.
Something's not right.
I've had sessions where I was like, we're gonna have to pick this up tomorrow. Like it's just like the vibration of that day was not. It
wasn't quite right.
And then we come back and we're like, man, everything just falls into place. Yeah. And it was like, why was that so hard yesterday? It's like because the energy was different.
Had to walk away and come back.
And it's such a microscopic thing. It's just like here instead of here, you know? Yeah. And it's just like...
Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
I know what you mean, though. It's like sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. But you definitely know how to get it there. I checked out your video of you performing at NAMM Show this year, and you know how to put together a band. It's what's your process? Because everybody in that band was pretty sick, man.
Yeah, well, I beat him. You know, I'm the Joe Jackson of bands. I think. Well, the first thing is that the band you see at NAMM is like my core band. So I've been playing with them for over 10 years. But also, we are a band of brothers. We're a family, you know, and for good or bad. And the thing I love about it is that we can have diversity of thought, diversity of opinion, diversity of ideals, family settings, lifestyles, and on the bandstand, it's all about the music. Yeah. You know, I've had times where people are like, you know, how can you have this person in the band, their politics? How could you have them because of their religion? I'm like, I can't force my life on somebody else. Yeah, you know, and also like. I don't care. I mean, I'm a pretty neutral person in general, but I was like, it's about the music, you know? And sometimes I'm just like, you know, here's the count off and we'll see you at the end, you know? Yeah. We'll see you at the double bars and the dots or whatever, you know? But it's because music is a level playground, you know? It's like that's why you can have an open mic or a jam where it's like, show us what you got, bring it, you know? The old guys bringing it, the young guys bringing it. Yeah. I remember one time when I was doing one of those things at an open mic or something, gospel music, and the guy was like, what were you doing? And I was like, I was feeling it. He was like, well, why don't you feel it in C? We're in C. You know, play in the right key. And so, so sometimes feeling it can be like, okay, you got to be feeling it with the rest of the group.
Get the right key.
That's what I love about so many great musicians, especially in jazz or other styles, where it's like, it's a true conversation. When you're looking, you're like, it's not about everyone overplaying. It's like they're talking to each other, you know? And we cannot always, like sometimes we can sing together and it works, and sometimes you do something, then I do something, and everyone knows kind of where to fall in. But it's great. I love when you see musicians where it's like, okay, she was singing something. Now I see the drums picking up on that. Now I see the bass is picking up on what they were doing. Now the keys is picking up on some other thing or adding to it. Or at the same way, Herbie Hancock was like, Miles Davis was good at, like, if I hit a wrong note, he would move to make me right. That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be listening. So it's like, it ebbs and flows. So if someone's like off, we flip the beat around them, to make that work. And so I like that aspect of working with other people. So everyone I work with, I had a tattoo artist years ago, and he would always do a consultation with people before he would do their work, and they would come to the tattoo artist because I have 2 full sleeves. And so he was like, yeah, I'm not gonna lock myself for 4 hours with this person if I cannot have a conversation with them. He's like, I bring them in here because I'll just say no. So it's like the same way I always bring musicians in. We talk about other stuff. We vibe. And what do you do? What do you do outside of music? What do you do for fun? Like, what do you think about this crazy? I throw a random question in there just to see what they say. Because it's like that's gonna give me a good judge of like, can I hang with this person for hours if we're gonna go tape this thing or do whatever? Or,
it's not just playing.
Yeah, it's not, because it's like you can hire a hired gun, but I don't do that as often, because like, no, I like people who they get me as a person and as a musician and as a friend. And yeah, I mean, obviously if we had all the time and the money, you get a lot of cool people, but it's not about that for me. It's really about the brotherhood and to come up. It's like we all come up together. It's like, just because it's under my name, I always give recognition to all the players and shine light on them. And it's like, look what we did, because there's no self-made anything. It's a marketing term. Everybody uses it. It's like, oh, that person's a self-made millionaire, self-billionaire. It's like, that's ridiculous. Who bought your stuff? Who believed in you to invest in this?
Right.
It's like, you didn't use your own money.
Right.
So there's no self-made. It's like, why do we feel the need to bury that we had help, that other people did stuff, I mean, even with
where it is,
even with Thriller, like, there's a lot of backlash, a lot of ghost musicians,
Oh, yeah.
a lot of ghost writers, a lot of ghost producers. When I went to Berkeley, it was like ridiculous. I would go into all these teachers' rooms that had these Thriller plaques, and they'd be like, "Oh, producer." I was like, "How did you produce on this?" I was like, "I thought Quincy produced it." They were like, "He was like the producer, but he had all these sub-producers."
A lot.
You'd have to.
Yeah.
How could you be running that? Now you're doing Bad and Color Purple. It's like, you can't do everything at once.
Yeah, and everything being on point.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like you said, with even like Prince. I mean, yeah, a lot of it was him. A lot of it was. But he would also bounce a lot off of other bands. Like, I mean, even though Take Like the Time was really just funk Prince, but like, he bounced a lot of ideas off them, and the Revolution, some of that stuff. I mean, like I said, I still think most of it was probably Prince, but I think he was also kind of inspired by them from playing with them, and then he'd create more. And it's you're right. No one ever just makes anything in just a vacuum.
No, I mean, he needed a Morris Day. He needed someone to reflect what they were doing in Minneapolis and have a rival.
Yeah.
But also, it helped him push himself to a different transfer. Same with Bootsy Collins. Bootsy Collins needed a George Clinton.
Yeah.
When he was with James Brown, totally different. Also, I don't know why his brother Catfish never got his due, because he was one of the best guitar players I've ever seen in my life. If you ever listen to the James Brown live in Paris, the Love Power piece at the Olympia, Catfish is just ridiculous. But so Catfish was really the silent hero of Bootsy Collins. But Bootsy didn't have the glasses and the boots or any of that until he got into P-Funk. And then, and a lot of James Brown went that way. But it was like, Bootsy wasn't talking like that or anything. He was kind of like the shy, nerdy, bucktooth, this guy in the back. I mean, he was great, a monster on the bass, but young. And so, but I think he needed that underpinning of working with James to know that element to then move to then George. George had that throw spaghetti at the wall, we got everything in here kind of production style. And also, like, they did a lot of drugs because you can hear it in the music.
You can feel it.
Some of those nursery rhymes are just like, wow, I don't even know how that works.
It's like, you're out there in space, man. No, definitely. Yeah, George Clinton so much to me is like, especially watching him, I don't think it was last month, but like watching him, it's like he's the conductor of the Symphony of Funk. I mean, literally all these things going on stage, and he jumps in, he does his thing, and he steps back, and there's just like, he's the conductor. That's what I see. Mm-hmm. And it's genius.
Very much so. And it's interesting because whenever they're interviewed, like a Bootsy or whoever, they're like, he's not a singer. He is not a singer. He's an entertainer.
Yeah.
But it makes sense because he came from, he was a hairstylist.
Yeah.
You know? So he knew about the showmanship of how you look and how to market and how to build something around that. And then, just he knew talent. He knew how to pull people together, and he wasn't afraid to be outlandish, you know. And that's what made P-Funk, Parliament Funkadelic, like they just and speaking of rock, I mean the Funkadelic stuff, very heavy on the rock side.
Oh yeah,
and that was cool. You look at some of Eddie Hazel's guitar stuff, like just some amazing work, and George, I mean he did later stuff for he did the Tracy Ullman intro and a bunch of stuff. Like he was always around, like doing little cool things, and the crazy hair and whatnot, and an anomaly. Sometimes I know like when the Atomic Dog was coming out, it got hard getting radio play because he was kind of like, because he did so many drugs and stuff, he just wouldn't show the things, so people were like, I don't know if we want to deal with him now, but that was a huge monster hit and brought him into so many sampling eras later with Snoop and Dre and all that stuff, and later working with Kendrick Lamar and a bunch of stuff. So I think Cream always rises to the top. I think there are people who, when they march to the beat of their own drum, like a George Clinton, then it's like, people always think the dancer is mad because they can't hear the music, but he hears it,
Totally.
It's like Picasso. Picasso said, art is not about what I see, it's about what I can make you see. That's what I want to do with music. All my music is like, I want to let you hear what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
What I've heard this whole time. That's my goal, is to be like, now you can hear what I heard.
Genius thought. So tell me, in your musical journey, I think that a lot of upcoming artists, they see you, Cliff, and they say, he's just got it. And what you do, but what I'm saying is that they don't see the blood, the sweat, the tears, the setbacks, the triumphs. I mean, can you give us an experience where, maybe some point in your career where you're really excited, had a setback, and how you just overcame it?
Sure. I mean, I'll definitely, what you're saying is that they have this theory about perseverance. They call it true grit, Angela Duckworth grit. And I tell people all the time, perseverance, real perseverance, is continuing when the feeling to do it and want to do it is gone. Because that you have to be a crazy person to do music for a long, extended time. There's a lot of no's and a lot of disappointments and dead ends and delays and setbacks, for sure. I remember when I first moved to LA 20 years ago, I auditioned for American Idol, and I went through a couple rounds on there, and I thought that was going to be the hot ticket. And I was like, oh, they like me. And, that's a dangerous drug, more than alcohol or heroin or marijuana, the drug of trying to do more, be more to get people to like you. I think the dopamine rush. And so I go through all these rounds, and I get finally on TV, and I get cut. And I was like, wow, that was like a gut check where I was like, man, it's over. My career is done. There's nothing, this was supposed to be it. And then I realized, I was like, I never wanted to win reality TV. I don't even like reality TV. I just wanted to do music. Yeah. And so it made me angry. I was like, no one tells me no. So I went immediately and started my first band, the Moon Crickets, and we started playing some shows, and I was like, I'm going to write some songs. I think I had 4. We did a show, 4 songs, and then we just built it from there. But I think you have to believe in yourself, whether anyone believes in you or not. And I think the perseverance is rejection therapy, getting used to the amount and high prevalence of no's But those no's will eventually get to it, yes, but you got a lot of them. It's like in the publishing world, now that I have a book out called Side Hustle and Flow, I sent out 400 queries to find the publisher that finally, took that project. You look at someone like Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss taught the world to read.
Yeah.
37 publishers said no.
Isn't that crazy?
Harry Potter is $1 billion franchise. 7 publishers said no. All kinds of stories like that. So it's like, if American Idol was my one no, we wouldn't be having this conversation if I was like, well, that's it. I just hung it all up.
A lot of yeses after that no.
Yeah. But you have to put yourself out there because not everybody's going to see your vision. Sometimes you got to green light it. And that's not just me. Like, I had to start my own record label. I had to start my own publishing company. I had to put my own music out there because people wouldn't touch it. But that's what Jay-Z did. James Brown to do it too. He wanted to do his live at Apollo album. King Records said no. They said nobody wants this live record. So he said, fine, I'll put my own money.
Yeah. And
it was one of his biggest records of the 60s. And so sometimes you just have to have that belief. You don't want to do it? I'll do it.
Got to bet on yourself.
You have to, because again, not everybody can see your vision and not everyone can hear that music. Sonny and Cher, he comes to his wife, says, I got this hit song. She said, not your best. Went back to bed. Woke up the next morning, they recorded it, and that was I Got You, Babe. So it's like, you don't know.
Yeah.
If her no was like, well, this is not your best.
Yeah.
We may have never heard that song. It was a number one.
No, you gotta take a chance.
You have to. And it's like, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. You got to take them. You got to shoot your shot. I know that's Hamilton or Lin-Manuel, but you got to shoot your shots. Because, Les Brown said, if you shoot the moon, you miss, you hit a star. But the point is, like, you got to shoot a lot. You learn from refining that pitch. So when you do get in front of the right person and you get to pitch it again, you've learned from all those no's how to tweak it.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, I walk down the street, people are like, hey, man, let me tell you this, let me tell you that. I said, look, whatever you got to say to me, you need to get to your irresistible offer up front.
That's right.
Trying to build rapport and all this other stuff, I don't have time.
No.
Just, what do you want?
Not in today's market.
15 seconds. What is it? And why do I need it? And what do you need from me?
Right.
Quick. And so that's what you learn.
Yeah.
You get a lot of no's, you learn how to be quick. Exactly getting to the point.
Man, so true. So tell me, Cliff, what's next on the horizon?
Well, the new album's about to drop, so I'm super excited about that. Beach Please on Color Red Music, and it's been a labor of love of a bunch of stuff. And this is my first year of doing 2 albums back to back. So my first 2 full lengths I had in March, You Showed Me the Way, the Ella Fitzgerald tribute that came out, and I did really well. And so I'm super excited to be getting back to the funk soul stuff with Beach Please. But we already have a couple more records on deck for next year, a contemporary EP, an outing with a string quartet, the Constellation Quartet, is going to come out next year too. And I'm going to follow up on my second audiobook as well. That's all about my weight loss journey. I lost 50 pounds last year, reversed type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I'm excited about that. Really, as a black man, as a person over 40, there's a lot of misinformation with medical industry, a lot of misinformation about insurance, and just ultimately just music or books or anything. It's all about hope. My message is, if I can do it, you could do it too. But more importantly, like, don't just believe anything that's told to you or sold to you. Like, you get to decide. You get to make a choice. Don't succumb, overcome. That's what I'm trying to get out there, all my dreams and all the ways. And so whether it's my radio show or something else with TV or film or whatever, it's like I'm going to do it all because you only have one life to live. And
do it now.
Yeah, people, they say to you, well, I don't want to do this or that because it's going to take a lot of time. And ultimately, the time will pass either way. It's better to do it. When I look back the last 10 years and I can see those 10 albums, I'm very proud. Not just because they got out, but because it's like, I know what I did 10 years,
Yeah.
Some people, they don't know what they've done. They haven't done anything.
They're not in the show for
And now the next 10 years, you got to make a plan.
Yeah. No, that so much makes sense. And tell us about the radio show.
Yeah, so the radio show Deeper Grooves, that birthed out of the podcast Deeper Grooves that we had. Started both the book and Deeper Grooves during the pandemic. But yeah, the radio station out of CSUN, Cal State Northridge, KCSN, the SoCal sound. They were playing me on their LA Spotlights music for a couple of years. And so my radio team was like, hey, they're playing you a lot. And so I met with the program director. His name's Mookie. And I was like, thank you so much for playing me, because I appreciate every play. And so we just started talking, and I was like, hey, I've been kind of curating these playlists just for fun, and a lot of funk soul stuff, some deep cuts, some B-sides. Sent it over to him, and I was like, what do you think? And he was like, I think you should have your own radio show. Do you want to take this Friday night slot? And I was like, I don't know anything about radio, but it sounds cool, sure. So I did, and then they moved it now to Saturday nights, and now it's been 3 years running, 180 episodes every Saturday at 10 p.m. And I was Rookie of the Year my first year. But yeah, it's been exciting. I love the relationship with the radio station. I love being on terrestrial and beyond. I think radio still matters. I think college radio still matters. I think having humans, not machines, not algorithms, actually curate everybody who's on staff is really knowledgeable, but also just really passionate about breaking artists, especially local ones, and that's important. I've met so many artists that I've now put on the station, or we've played shows locally on bills together and stuff that I wouldn't have met otherwise, because it's all about creating opportunity. I believe you fight to get through those no's, to get that yes and go through the door, but then you leave the door open and you create bridges and connections and opportunities for other people. People come to me and they're like, you know someone this? I'm like, yeah, let me send you their phone, let me send their email, tell them I sent you, let me intro to them. I have no problem with that, because I know how hard it is to get the help, and it shouldn't be that hard. And I'm like, you put yourself out there and they can decide, but I don't want to be the block. And so I always try to have like new music nights where we round up, artists that nobody's ever heard. I'm like, hey, let's play that, or shine a light on an artist that's old and retired that I think people should know. And we put the flowers out there. So I'm glad to be able to have just a safe space that gives me carte blanche to play whatever I want. And to have that consistent airtime would be expensive to buy it. So I'm just fortunate to be able to have that opportunity, and I love it. I mean, I do it as a labor of love. It takes time to curate and pick the songs, but I love it. Every episode I listen to it multiple times because I learned something. It takes me back to those Berkeley Library and Media Center days, and I'm still that music nerd that's still on this growth journey and learning opportunity. And there's just so many songs out there. 300,000 songs drop every week, so I'll never know them all. So people can send them to me, or we can trade them, and I'll put stuff on, because I love meeting new people and meeting new artists and hearing new things. And there's definitely not enough lifetime to hear them all, I can tell you that.
That's definitely. Where can people find you?
They can always find me on social media, every social media platform, Twitter, which is now X, and Instagram and everything, at Cliff Beach Music. So if you put at Cliff Beach Music, or on any of the streaming platforms, Cliff Beach, just like it's spelled and it sounds, Cliff like the cliff, beach like the beach. If you're pronouncing it Cliff Beach, you're pronouncing it wrong. Don't do that. Stop.
Oh, man. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, man. It was so much fun.
Thank you. I look forward to hearing more shows from you, and keep doing what you're doing, and we'll chat again for sure.
Yes, sir.